Can nonprofits create for-profit companies? Recently, in the news, Elon Musk was discussing a response from ChatGPT. Elon had asked ChatGPT the following question: can you create a nonprofit and then spawn a for-profit company under it using resources from the nonprofit? And ChatGPT essentially said, no, nonprofits are not permitted to use their resources to create for-profit companies. That's not necessarily correct. And I love ChatGPT. I use it a lot. In my experience, the vast majority of the time, ChatGPT provides the right answer. And I understand it's getting better and better. But unfortunately, it's not always right because it's based on information on the internet. And as we all know, information on the internet isn't always right. So let's talk about whether a nonprofit can create a for-profit company. And the answer is quite simple. It can. I'm Aaron Hall. I'm a business attorney. I also deal with nonprofit organizations. There's a lot of overlap there. And I represent entrepreneurial companies. I put together these educational videos to help you as business owners and organization leaders understand how to avoid legal problems and how to educate yourself to empower yourself as a leader. Let's get into the heart of the issue that made headlines recently. So, setting aside that Elon Musk was trying to use ChatGPT's answer to raise questions about OpenAI, the founders of ChatGPT, let's just simply talk about, generically speaking, can a nonprofit, OpenAI was one at one point or is partially one, but can a nonprofit create a business like an LLC or a corporation? And the answer is quite simply yes. What's the difference between a nonprofit and a for-profit company? Well, a nonprofit is created for the benefit of the public. Any profits that are generated in the company or in the nonprofit organization must be used for the purposes of the nonprofit. You cannot have any profit distributions to shareholders because a nonprofit has no shareholders. A nonprofit doesn't have owners. An LLC has owners or members. And so a profit distribution or dividends would be paid out to the owners of an LLC or a corporation. A nonprofit doesn't have that. A nonprofit has a board of directors who have fiduciary duties to administer the organization and oversee the organization for the benefit of the public, as stated in the nonprofit's articles of incorporation. What does the law say about starting a for-profit business from a nonprofit organization? The law says nonprofits can start a for-profit business, but there are some restrictions and some taxes probably due. Let's talk about that tax. It's called Unrelated Business Income Tax, or UBIT. What is UBIT, or Unrelated Business Income Tax? It is income tax for certain activities within a nonprofit. What activities are we talking about, or what income? It's income from a trade or business regularly carried on that is not substantially related to the charitable, educational, or other purpose for which the nonprofit obtained tax-exempt status. So, let's talk about each one of those elements. In other words, a nonprofit will have to pay tax on income that meets these three elements. First, income from a trade or business. So if a nonprofit either starts an LLC or a corporation or has some other business enterprise, like let's say it's a car wash that the church youth group does once a year to raise money for the activities of the church, is that activity subject to unrelated business income tax? Well, let's talk about it. Is it income from a trade or business? When we look at that, we don't look at how the money is spent, because of course it's spent for the nonprofit. We look at how the money is generated. Is a car wash income from a trade or business? Yes. Even though it's done by the youth group kids, it's income from a trade or business. Is it regularly carried on? Well, in this situation, if they do it once a year or even a couple times a year, the answer is no. It's not regularly carried on. So because a car wash does not fulfill that element, the revenue from the car wash would not be subject to UBIT. In other words, the church would not have to pay unrelated business income tax. And then finally, the question is the income from the trade or business substantially related to the charitable, educational, or other purpose? And again, we look at how it's generated, how that income is generated. And the answer here is no. It's not generated from church activities. It's generated from something that's traditionally a trade or a business, a car wash. Now you might say, well, what about a coffee shop in a church on Sunday? Well, a coffee shop is clearly income from a trade or business. They're selling coffee. It's regularly carried on because every Sunday they have it. Now you might argue, well, it's not every day, it's only every Sunday. And that's an argument. But finally then we have, is it substantially related to the charitable, educational, or other purpose? You could make a good argument that having coffee available prior to a church service enhances the experience in the church service. People are more alert, they're more awake, they feel better. It makes for a more pleasant experience. Likewise, if they have some donuts or rolls available for purchase ahead of time, people are less hungry during the church service. They're more likely to come to the church service because of the refreshments that are available. Now, I don't know if there's actually been an IRS ruling on this. The IRS often takes a position contrary to taxpayers. In other words, the IRS says, hey, taxes due. But these at least are the issues that are addressed when determining whether income is subject to tax in a 501c3 nonprofit organization. All right, some other questions. Why does the IRS allow nonprofits to own for-profit companies? Well, many times it's going to generate revenue for the organization. There was a time in the law when it wasn't real clear, but the law is very clear now that nonprofits can own LLCs and corporations. How complicated is it to start a for-profit company from a nonprofit? It's not hard. You just need an attorney who can help you navigate some of the legal issues here. How would someone know if a nonprofit owns a for-profit business? Often you can look up some sort of public filings like a 990, which is an annual filing provided by nonprofits to the IRS. That's public information. There might be other public filings or public listings. It's not always public though. What resources might a nonprofit use to start a for-profit company? A nonprofit can use its own resources to start a for-profit company as long as the proceeds from that company are also used for the nonprofit in the furtherance of its purpose or mission. Can a nonprofit use its resources to help an unrelated business? No. So let's say a nonprofit wants to use its resources to help an LLC or a corporation owned by somebody else. Can it do so? No. Nonprofit funds need to be used for the furtherance of the mission of the organization. Now, of course, a nonprofit could pay a printing company to provide printing services. We assume that those services are provided at a fair market value. A nonprofit can buy office supplies from an office supply company at a fair market value. A nonprofit can pay rent to a landlord or a management company for use of space at a fair market value. So there's nothing wrong with using nonprofit resources to pay fair market rates for services and goods. But a nonprofit cannot donate the resources to a business or cannot use those resources to create advertising or some other gift in kind or benefit in kind, kind of a non-monetary benefit for a private individual or a company owned by private individuals. Did ChatGPT have any validity in saying that creating for-profit from a nonprofit is unethical and illegal? I think there is some validity there because There's probably a lot of information on the internet about the important distinction between nonprofit and for-profit organizations. And so it is very important to keep a distinction there. But as far as technically, can a nonprofit own a for-profit company? The answer is yes. ChatGPT said that using nonprofit resources for a for-profit company would be, quote, clear violation of the nonprofit's tax-exempt status, unquote. How do nonprofits get around this? Well, nonprofits don't have to technically get around it. It is not a violation of a nonprofit's tax-exempt status to have a for-profit company. Nonprofits can create LLCs and corporations. They just have to keep in mind that they may owe tax. That's the UBIT, unrelated business income tax. And there are other rules and laws and regulations governing doing this properly. ChatGPT said that starting a for-profit company, quote, under the guise of nonprofit organization, unquote, is a violation of the law. Why is that inaccurate? What are the key differences in governance structures for-profit companies versus nonprofits? The big issue here is a for-profit company is owned by shareholders or members of an LLC, so it's private individuals, and it's operated for the profit and benefit of those individuals. A nonprofit is not owned by anybody, and it's operated for a public benefit governed by a board of directors. So very different in governance structure and ownership. How does a nonprofit communicate starting a business to stakeholders like donors, volunteers, and employees? Usually a nonprofit will first work with an attorney for the rollout and incorporation of an LLC or corporation. Technically, setting up an LLC is called organization, but regardless, an attorney will help with the legal aspects. And then PR people, whether employed by the nonprofit or outside, will help work with the attorney to communicate that the nonprofit has started an LLC or corporation to further the nonprofit's purposes and mission, and explain that there is no person personally benefiting from the profits of the company, that instead that company is used to benefit the organization so that it has more resources to further its mission. How do you retain the core values and culture of a nonprofit organization in the business it owns? I haven't seen this as a huge problem because usually when the nonprofit starts a business, the core values and the purpose permeate that business and the hiring of the people, and it's very clear in the messaging that the business exists for the benefit of a nonprofit. But ultimately, it is constant communication of the purpose in the business. Can a nonprofit co-own a business with private individuals? Technically, the answer is yes, but it needs to be done very carefully. For example, if a nonprofit buys shares in a publicly held company to invest some of its money, technically, that nonprofit co-owns the public corporation. So yes, it's permissible, but it's very risky if there is a private company. In other words, it's not on a public stock exchange, but it's owned by an individual. It's even more risky if the company that is co-owned is partially owned by the nonprofit and partially owned by somebody related to the nonprofit, like the president or a board member. It's possible to do it right, but there are a lot of rules and regulations about how that needs to be done so that it is approved by disinterested board members who are part of the nonprofit. And very likely that transaction is going to be scrutinized by the IRS or the Attorney General, and perhaps even by the courts. And so doing that properly often involves hiring an attorney who is very experienced with that sort of transaction. Can we consider ChatGPT to be a legitimate source of legal knowledge? I find ChatGPT is usually accurate, but not always. And I think the difficulty right now is the information is presented in a way that can lead people to rely on it without understanding that there may be errors. It's probably going to get better and better as artificial intelligence improves. But at this point, I find it helpful, but I don't rely on ChatGPT if the stakes are high. So to conclude, can you create a for-profit company inside a nonprofit? The answer is yes. You absolutely can. You just have to do it the right way. I'm Aaron Hall, an attorney for business owners. If you like educational videos like this, you're welcome to subscribe. And again, if you don't yet have the free resource I provide, 7 Common Legal Mistakes Made by New Businesses, go to aaronhall.com/free and sign up for that. You'll also get some exclusive videos that are educational to help you avoid common problems in your business. That's the best way to get the highest quality content that I put out, because I put it out for my subscribers so that we can stay in touch and you can improve your business and avoid unnecessary legal mistakes as you grow your company.